Okay, so picture this. Someone asks you a question in English. You know the answer. You actually know the words. And you just stand there, smiling.
While your brain is running at full speed internally.
Full speed, translating, checking grammar, second-guessing every word. And by the time you're ready to answer,
The conversation has moved on.
the conversation has completely moved on. And you just nod like you understood everything.
The nod, the universal, I have no idea what's happening, but I'm fine nod.
Every English learner has that nod perfected.
Hey everyone, I'm Michelle. Welcome back to Daily English Listening Podcast. So glad you're here today.
And I'm Chris. Today we're talking about something that I think is the real reason most people struggle with English. And it's not vocabulary, it's not grammar, it's confidence.
Specifically, the confidence to actually open your mouth and speak.
Which turns out to be a completely different skill from knowing the language.
Just hang out with us for a bit. This one is going to feel very familiar.
Possibly too familiar.
So let's start with the big myth, because I think there's one belief that keeps more people silent than anything else.
I need to be perfect before I speak.
That one. The idea that you have to have everything figured out, pronunciation, grammar, vocabulary, before you're allowed to have a real conversation.
And where does that come from? School, probably.
School, mostly, where every mistake was corrected in front of everyone and wrong answers had consequences.
So your brain learned if you're not sure, don't say it.
Which is a great strategy for a test, a terrible strategy for learning a language.
Because languages are learned by using them, not by studying them perfectly and then using them.
You improve by speaking, not by waiting until you're ready to speak.
And the waiting never ends, because there's always one more thing you feel like you need to learn first.
One more grammar rule, one more vocabulary list.
And meanwhile, another year goes by and you still haven't had a real conversation.
That's such a real pattern.
Okay, I want to hear from everyone listening right now. Drop a comment and tell us, have you ever known the answer to something in English, but stayed silent anyway? What stopped you? Because I think the answers are going to be very similar across the board.
Please do, because knowing you're not alone in this is genuinely helpful.
And honestly, if you're listening to this podcast, you already have more English than you think.
So much more. The problem was never the vocabulary. Let's be honest about that.
Okay, so what actually is confidence in this context? Because I don't think it means what most people think it means.
Right. Confidence when speaking English is not speaking perfectly. It's not sounding like a native. It's not having zero accent.
It's the willingness to speak even when you're not sure.
Even when you might make a mistake, even when you have to pause and think, even when the sentence doesn't come out the way you planned.
That's it. That's the whole definition.
And that kind of confidence, the I'll try anyway kind, that's something you build by doing, not by studying more.
The more you speak, the less scary it gets.
Every single time. It's not always comfortable, but it gets less uncomfortable with practice.
I want to share something embarrassing because I think it makes this real.
Oh, I love when you do this.
So I was trying to order at a restaurant once in another country. I had practiced the phrase. I knew exactly what I wanted to say.
And?
I said it completely wrong. Like, I mixed up two words and accidentally asked for something that made no sense. The waiter just stared at me.
What did you do?
I laughed, pointed at the menu, said that one please, and moved on.
And the world didn't end?
The world did not end. I got my food, and I remembered the correct phrase forever after that.
Because you used it, even badly, and that's how it sticks.
Making the mistake in a real situation is worth 10 hours of studying that phrase in a notebook.
That is not an exaggeration.
Not even slightly.
Okay, so let's talk about what actually holds people back in the moment, because it's not just one thing.
The big one for most people, translating in your head.
Yes, you hear something in English, your brain immediately translates it to your language, you formulate the answer in your language, then you translate it back to English, then you check it the grammar is right.
And by then, it's been 6 seconds and everyone is looking at you.
6 very long seconds.
And the thing is, that whole process is exhausting. It takes up so much mental energy that you have nothing left for actually communicating.
Fluent speakers don't translate, they think directly in the language.
Which sounds impossible when you're starting out, but it develops naturally the more you use English directly.
Without the safety net of your first language in the middle.
And a big part of that is letting go of needing every sentence to be perfect before it leaves your mouth.
Think of it like this. When you speak your own language, do you plan every sentence before you say it?
Never. You just talk.
You just talk. Words come out, sometimes in the wrong order. Sometimes you change direction mid-sentence, and it's fine.
Because communication is the goal, not perfection.
And the same standard applies to English. The goal is to be understood, not to be perfect.
That shift alone removes so much pressure.
And it changes what you're listening for in a conversation. Instead of monitoring every word you say, you're actually paying attention to the other person.
Which makes the conversation better for both of you.
Because when you're too focused on your own performance, you miss half of what the other person is saying.
And then you're responding to what you thought they said instead of what they actually said.
Which creates its own kind of miscommunication.
So, ironically, worrying less about your English actually improves your English.
Because you're present, you're in the conversation, instead of watching yourself from outside it.
That outside watching thing is exhausting, by the way.
So exhausting. It's like trying to drive while also watching a video of yourself driving.
That is exactly what it feels like.
You can't do both well at the same time. Pick one. Be in the conversation.
Let the words take care of themselves.
And they will, more than you think.
Okay, I want to add something here about mistakes specifically, because I think people have a complicated relationship with them.
Very complicated.
Making a mistake in English feels embarrassing. But here's the thing, native speakers make mistakes constantly.
Constantly. Wrong word, wrong tense, incomplete sentence, all of it.
And nobody stops the conversation to correct them.
Because the communication happened, the meaning got through.
And that's the whole point.
So when you make a mistake and the other person still understands you, that's not a failure, that's a success.
You communicated in a second language. That's genuinely impressive.
Give yourself credit for that.
Okay, one more thing that I think is really underrated for building confidence. Finding low-stakes situations to practice.
Low stakes, meaning situations where the consequences of a mistake are basically zero.
Talking to a cashier, ordering coffee, asking for directions even when you already know where you're going.
The practice order?
The practice order. Just to use the language in a real situation with a real person.
And those small interactions add up. Every one of them is a tiny rep.
Like going to the gym. Nobody gets strong from one workout.
But 100 small ones over time, that changes everything.
And with speaking confidence, it works the same way. 100 small conversations add up to something real.
Stop waiting for confidence to arrive. Build it in small moments every single day.
Honestly, when I stopped caring about being embarrassed, there was a specific moment where I thought, okay, I'm going to say something wrong, someone might laugh, and that will be fine.
And after that?
It got so much easier, not because my grammar improved overnight, because I stopped fighting the discomfort.
That's such a good way to put it. You stopped fighting the discomfort.
And the discomfort got smaller every time I didn't run away from it.
Okay, let's talk about some practical things that actually help. And I want to be clear, these are not rules. They're things that work.
Starting with use simple sentences.
Yes, this is huge. A lot of learners think they need to express complex ideas in complex ways, and when they can't find the complicated words, they say nothing.
But you can almost always say something simpler.
I don't know the exact word, but it's like a small bag you carry. That works. That communicates. That's a real conversation.
Native speakers do this all the time, by the way. We describe things, we use examples, we say, like when nobody always has the exact word.
Right. Describing around a word you don't know is a skill, not a failure.
Another thing that helps, stop apologizing for your English before you start.
Oh, this one.
Sorry, my English is not very good, before every sentence.
And the other person is standing there thinking, you literally just spoke a perfect sentence.
The apology was in better English than the conversation they expected.
And starting with an apology puts you in a position of weakness before you've said anything.
Just start talking. If you make a mistake, you'll deal with it then.
Which leads to the next thing. When you make a mistake, don't stop and correct yourself mid-sentence unless it's really necessary.
Because most of the time, the other person understood you anyway.
And stopping to correct yourself every 3 words breaks the flow completely.
Fluency doesn't mean 0 mistakes. It means mistakes don't stop you.
That's actually a really clean definition.
Another practical one, repeat structures that work for you.
Yes, if you've used, "I was wondering if," successfully once, use it again and again and again.
Build a small set of sentences you're comfortable with and lean on them.
Could you say that again? I'm not sure I follow. What I mean is, these phrases carry you through so many situations.
And they sound natural because they are natural.
The wildcard thought I want to throw in here, and this one surprised me when I first heard it, is that a slight accent or imperfect grammar actually makes you more interesting to talk to, not less.
Really?
Really, when someone is clearly making the effort to communicate in a second language, most people find that impressive, not something to judge.
Because it is impressive. It's genuinely hard.
And the people worth talking to know that.
The ones who judge you for an accent or a grammar mistake, that says everything about them and nothing about your English.
Exactly. And once you believe that, really believe it, speaking becomes so much lighter.
Less weight on every word.
Less performance, more conversation.
And that's when English starts to feel like a tool instead of a test.
A tool you use to connect with people, to travel, to work, to enjoy things.
Not something you pass or fail.
And here's the thing that I think is worth saying clearly before we close this out. Progress in speaking confidence is not linear.
Not at all.
Some days you'll have a great conversation and feel amazing. Other days you'll freeze on a word you know perfectly well.
And that's just how it goes. It doesn't mean you're going backwards.
It means you're human, and humans have good days and off days in every language.
Including their first one.
The direction over time is forward, even when individual days feel like steps back.
You don't need perfect English to speak English.
You need the courage to start.
And then to keep going after the first mistake.
And the one after that.
And every one after that. Because each one is teaching you something a textbook never could.
All right, so let's spend a moment on some of the words and expressions that came up today, because these are worth keeping.
Starting with confidence. And it's worth making clear what this word actually means in this context. Confidence is not feeling certain you'll get everything right. A good example would be, she spoke with confidence even though she made a few mistakes. Confidence is the willingness to act despite uncertainty. You can be confident and still be nervous. Those two things coexist.
Then fluency, which people often confuse with perfection. Fluency means you can communicate naturally and keep the conversation going, not that you never make mistakes. Like when you say, "His English isn't perfect, but he's very fluent." Fluent means the flow is there, the connection is there, the communication happens.
Hesitation, the pause or delay before speaking, often caused by searching for words or checking grammar mentally. She spoke without hesitation. There was a long hesitation before he answered. In English learners, hesitation is often the visible sign of the translation process happening internally.
Comfort zone, a very common American English expression for the mental space where things feel safe and familiar. Stepping outside your comfort zone means doing something that makes you uncomfortable in order to grow. For language learners, speaking in public is often outside their comfort zone. You use it like this. Every conversation in English pushed her a little further outside her comfort zone.
Articulate, to express ideas clearly and effectively in words. She's very articulate. He struggled to articulate what he meant. This is a compliment when used about someone speaking. Interestingly, you can be articulate in a second language with an accent. Articulate is about clarity of thought, not perfection of pronunciation.
Miscommunication, when something is understood differently than intended. It was a simple miscommunication. The miscommunication caused a lot of confusion. For English learners, this is important to know because it normalizes moments when things don't land correctly. A miscommunication is not a failure. It's a moment to clarify.
Trial and error, the process of learning by trying things, making mistakes, and adjusting. She learned to speak through trial and error. This phrase is extremely common in English for any kind of learning process. It removes the shame from mistakes because it frames them as part of the system, not evidence of failure.
And break the ice, a very common idiom meaning to say or do something that makes a situation feel less awkward, especially at the beginning of a conversation. He told a joke to break the ice. Once you break the ice, the conversation flows. For English learners, this is the hardest moment, starting. Breaking the ice is the skill that opens everything else.
And speaking of opening things, if today got you thinking about why your brain keeps overthinking before you speak, we have an episode that goes directly into that.
It's right below this one. Go find it.
See you there.